It was the beginning of the pandemic. I was already coming out of a stressful time, and I couldn't sleep. The doctor said try these couple meds. It was a pair, sertraline and trazodone.
How have things sort of progressed over the last 3 years? Maybe you could walk us through the different kind of symptoms you were having and where they are now.
When I'm tired, these symptoms are worse. So if at certain points of the day, I'm busy or I'm anticipating something, my neuropathy will come back. The tinnitus will get worse. The visuals are always the same, but whether or not I react to them is another matter. And I don't want to give anybody a guidebook, but I found a very particular set of things really helpful. My God, if you're trying to decide between Trazodone or an SSRI and what I just gave you, I'm going to promise you that that's going to be a better bet to start off with.
So hi, James. Thanks so much for coming on. James is going to be talking to us about an antidepressant injury. From what I've gathered so far, the really interesting thing about this, and there's probably more, is that it had quite serious visual impairments that went along with it, which is on the more unusual side of what I've seen with protracted withdrawal injuries. James, I'm just delighted that you're willing to come on and share your story. I always think it's cool to start from the beginning. So tell me, how did all of this happen? How did you end up on the meds? How did you decide to come off? Just walk us through it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I was, it was the beginning of the pandemic. I was already coming out of a stressful time and I couldn't sleep. It was that simple. Just couldn't sleep and needed something to help with sleep. And so the doctor said try these couple meds. It was a pair, sertraline and trazodone, and see if that helps. So I was isolated for a number of weeks following a very stressful time. And
when you say stressful time, I know you have a stressful job. I know you're a professor, like a business professor, and I imagine that's. Was it work related? Was it relational? Were there a lot of different things going on?
It was relationship. It was related to the relationship, and I had also needed to. I was finishing my PhD, undertaking a PhD, and
oh my God!
had to travel for those things, and I only had one place to hang out, and that was my cottage 2 hours north of the city that I live in, which is Winnipeg, Canada. And so I found myself in the middle of nowhere, lockdown, nobody's allowed to go, to come to me. Nobody wanted me to be in their presence. And I had lots of friends, but, at that point we thought it was Ebola or something. Sure. So, just no luck, So I turned to these drugs I figured, well, I'll just anesthetize myself until I can get out of this mess.
Well, so catch me up on that, because I always think was this the first time you'd taken psychiatric meds?
It was, yeah.
And so wow, all right. Yeah. And how old were you when you got on them?
Well, a little more than 3 years ago. So I was 37, I guess.
37. Okay, so you went 37 years without anything, and then I'm always curious about how. I guess it was discussed, when you got on them. So maybe the first question, did you see a psychiatrist or a family medicine physician?
It was I think it was a family medicine physician. Yeah, that's what it would have been.
So just walk us through briefly what the interaction was like. How long was the meeting? What did they tell you about? There's two things. You could talk about risks and benefits of the drug, but there's also a whole philosophy behind taking a medication and how it might change. You might say they just said nothing. They said just take it. But if they said more than that, then please just walk us through what it was like for you.
Yeah, I was pretty. I was distressed by this lack of sleep because I'd always been a really good sleeper. And so I felt something must really be wrong. What do I do? I don't have these social resources I need. And in hindsight, that's really all I needed. But the conversation went something like, actually, I can kind of remember exactly the words they used. They said, oh, we have something that would work for you. These are very safe things. They're prescribed to people young and old. And because I was very hesitant to use any kind of medication, I wouldn't even use a pain medication if I didn't need to. I'd try to just muddle through, like to a detriment, And so I figured, well, I'm really struggling now, so I might as well just give this a try. They say it's safe. It's, I get in my own way with respect to these kinds of solutions often. So I'd best just listen to them this time and give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, and I can always, get off or try something else.
And let me ask you this, because something else that, like, I've noticed just over my lifetime from back probably as soon as I could remember TV and media and things like that, we didn't used to talk a lot about depression, at least on TV and media. I don't remember hearing celebrities talking about their depression back in the mid 2000s, early 2000s. And then all of a sudden, I think kind of late 2000s, and then ever since then, we've been hearing more and more about depression and fighting the stigma of depression and taking medications. Do you feel like that sort of, the ubiquity of taking antidepressants in a way almost makes it seem safer, so that when you go in there and a doctor's like, hey, they're pretty safe, you're like, well, shit, I know like so many people on TV that are doing it. I probably have coworkers and friends and maybe even family members that take it. Do you think that kind of lowers the guard that people have, when initiating a medication like this, just how pervasive it is everywhere?
Yeah, it seems very normalized. I don't, at this stage, I think I'd probably be hard pressed to find someone who isn't on something either for sleep or for some symptom or whatever. And so it was very much normalized. It is very much normalized. And it was certainly normalized in the conversation I had. And I wasn't even sure I was depressed. I was just had insomnia and I was desperate to get to sleep, So
I guess my other question for you, and this is more of a soapbox issue just for me, and maybe not relevant to everyone else, but I stopped drinking caffeine and I had like just a huge improvement in my mood and my sleep. When you remember that time when you were isolated and you were doing your PhD, was this, were you drinking a lot of coffee? Was there a lot of I don't know if there was any like nicotine use going on as well, just different things like that?
There was 1 to 2 cups of coffee in the morning. And I didn't drink like a lot of it, but a little bit's enough for me. I'm very sensitive to any drug, as I discovered the hard way. But I also would have like a glass of wine, more than a glass of wine in the evenings at that time, because I was like, well, I need an upper in the morning and downer in the evening, and that probably messed up my sleep to some degree, because I didn't do that very often before either. So
I know I'm like a crazy person when I talk about this stuff, because it had such a massive impact on me, and I think people can't believe it. I got my wife to stop drinking coffee, but it didn't have a huge impact on her like it did for me. So I think it's like this random thing, but I stopped drinking it, and I slept like a teenager. It was just insane what had happened, and it really drove me into the ground, because I was also just starting new jobs when I started drinking really heavily, and it got out of control quickly, where it was like, big cup of coffee in the morning, sodas throughout the day, just anything to keep me going. And so, but okay, so that's interesting. So so you went in there for sleep, but they actually wanted to give you citalopram, right? Was that the drug that you mentioned?
The first one was Trazodone. Actually, the first one they recommended was sertraline. And then I said, but I don't know, but I'm looking for something for sleep. Is that for sleep? And they're like, well, we'll add this. And then they added Trazodone. They said, we can pair these together. They both work really well. So, and it's in hindsight, and after having learned a lot about these drugs, I have no idea why sertraline was the first thing they gave me, because as I said, I wanted to sleep, so I get Trazodone, but in hindsight, I really didn't need the double whammy. There's no way. And what was also very interesting, very shortly after that, I realized that sertraline gave me this wired feeling that I didn't seem to need. It was sort of inflaming the problem I was trying to deal with. But Trazodone would knock me out for days, it would just, even just a small dose. I was very groggy, the following day. So then I would get off of, I got on sertraline. They said, well, stay on it, because that's of course what you say when you get on an antidepressant, stay on it for 6 weeks or something. And I was like, nope, still wiring me up, don't need it. And got off of it, stayed on Trazodone, and anyway, so that was the beginning of this like it's a cycle of like trial and error for years.
Okay. All right. So you're off the Zoloft. You're just taking the Trazodone.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's working, but it's making you feel hungover in the morning. Yeah. So walk us forward from there. Like, what further interactions did you have with the mental health care system up until when you, I guess, eventually discontinued and had your problems?
Well, I kept saying to folks that like I seemed to be wired. They said like, give it time, give it time, give it time. I gave it time. I got off, and then I still didn't quite feel like something. I don't know what it did, but I just didn't feel good, in the weeks afterward. And they're like, well, that's probably withdrawal. You should go back on, because that's also what they say. It's like, go back on. Maybe you need to be on forever. I was like, like it sure feels.
Wait, the Zoloft?
Yeah, Zoloft, and if not that one, try a different one. So I got off of Zoloft and then got back on it because they said like, I think that's
How long were you on the Zoloft for? Was it
a couple of months?
A couple months.
Okay. Months. Yeah. And I felt wired, and it was like, this is doing the opposite of what I need. I need to get off this thing. Yeah. And like, no, give it more time. So get back on it. And I was like, nope, still doing the same damn thing. Like then they're like, well, then try this other one. So then I tried venlafaxine, worse, and escitalopram. By the time I got to escitalopram, I just I could hardly even put it in my body because I was so like, this seems wrong. Like I don't want to do this, but I was still on Trazodone. So this was like, pandemic starts, we're months in, already reality feels weird, and then I've got this layer of like chemical whatever, neuro emotion stuff.
And do you think you're depressed at this stage, or
No.
are you just like, hey, maybe the docs know something I don't know? Like, I guess I'll take the Lexapro.
Yeah, that was more like what it was. I was like, this must be like, I was stressed out for sure, and I guess I do know some people that seem to be a little calmer on sertraline or on something like it. So I can understand, I guess, where they're coming from, but it certainly didn't work for me. And then it got, the weirdest thing started. The thing that started happening to me that I didn't like was I started getting these shocking sensation in my extremities.
Jesus.
And I understand that, like, I've heard from a few people who are on these things that happens.
Yeah.
But then when I weaned off, I still had this thing, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is happening. And then I'd go in to talk to them about it. And they're like, well, then we should give you gabapentin. And I was like, oh, well, and desperate, but didn't do it. But I can say I have two friends who had a similar journey. One was just given on an SSRI on gabapentin because it had the same kind of sensation. But I think for him, it wasn't his limbs. It was like his hips or something. I don't know. But
it's crazy how quickly like the prescribing cascade begins, right? Because I guess you don't consider yourself depressed. Like you're just like, hey, I just really need some help with my sleep. Mm-hmm. You start developing some neuropathy, which was probably only going to be time limited for you. I mean, even if you'd had it emerged on the drug, hey James, let's just give it a month and let's just see kind of what your nervous system does. But instead of that, the gabapentin, and so it could snowball, but it sounds like you sidestepped that one. Well done. Yeah.
Well, because I started feeling like my natural inclination is to avoid drugs in general. So my natural inclination was never to take any of this stuff, but thought, okay, I'll overwrite that and give it a shot. Oh, no, this isn't working for me. And so that lingered where it's like, I still don't think this is the right path, but I also didn't have a way through, and I didn't have any encouragement. I didn't have any coaching. I didn't have any knowledge, and turning to Google at the beginning of this was useless, right? Because the information was so general and and watered down, and who knows who it's good for. Like I don't know if many people end up like this, but I can say certainly after the years of going through it that when you take these problems to a professional, in my experience, you're cast as kind of a weirdo, and well, that would be strange. So we'll give you something else.
James, on top of his depression, he now has a psychosomatic illness.
Yes, exactly.
We've got a hysterical man here who's manifesting fake neurological symptoms.
Exactly.
Because he's in the cabin, he's having relational problems, and he has a high stress job. Yeah.
After what, 40 years of none of it? Like it didn't make any
Yeah.
sense. It still doesn't quite make sense. There must be some underlying problem. Actually, it was just yesterday I was telling you, like, I went to see if I can get, like, this has cost me tens of thousands of dollars to try and work through in coaching and therapy and supplements and glasses and whatever. And just yesterday, again, like after all this trial and error and talking to people who've been through it and knowing what works and what doesn't now, still had the same it's exactly what you just said. It must be psychosomatic. We don't really know, you know, and also we can't point you in a direction for help. Okay.
Not very helpful.
No.
But let's stay. I want to stay on the chronology because I want to get the details. So they try and give you gabapentin. Where are you kind of at this point in your journey towards being like, hey, I want to stop these meds?
I was pretty determined not to take them anymore. But I probably needed to taper. I certainly needed to taper, and I didn't. And so the problems got worse before they got better. And that went on for, well, it was Christmas 2020 when I decided.
And when you say taper, you mean like taper the Lexapro, I believe, right?
At this point, it was just Trazodone that I was left with.
Okay, because you tapered the Lexapro, you were left with the
sertraline,
neuropathy.
Yeah.
Sorry, the sertraline. Yeah. And then I guess at that point, because you'd had that bad experience, you said probably time to get off the Trazodone, and you were thinking about coming off. Okay, yeah, good. Yep.
And so I just quit, like cold turkey quit, without any. Actually, the guidance was that this is a small enough dose that you can probably just quit cold turkey.
Like 25 or a 50?
50, yeah.
50, okay.
But I'd been on it.
What was the month and year that you cold turkeyed?
It was December 2020. So it was a better part of a year that I was on it.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, talk to us. What happened?
Well, immediately.
And the other thing I wanted to know is so it was the sertraline that you were on that gave you neuropathy, and how long? What was the duration you were on that for?
Well, that was only. Well, it was a couple months.
A couple months. Yeah. And how long between stopping the sertraline and stopping the Trazodone?
Many months, because the symptoms were so bad at times that I would go on the sertraline to see if I could get rid of them. But it was I would like stop and start, which is like the worst thing you can do, right? Like, because I was just messing around with the.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So when you say the symptoms were so bad, was that like the neuropathic pain that you were having, that kind of the jolting and electricity?
Yeah, and the feeling, this sense of unease, which was what I was trying to get rid of in the first place. And some of that was due to circumstances. Some of that was due to probably the sertraline. So
after a couple of months, that's...
Yeah.
And, I've heard these stories before, though, of people who become dependent on the medication after a couple of months, and then they do have withdrawal reactions. And this is going to be interesting with your story, because you're going to tell me what happened after the Trazodone and probably why it's hard to tease out how much of this is sertraline and how much of this is Trazodone, or whether it's like a 1-2 punch situation.
Yeah, exactly. When I got off the Trazodone, it was interesting because immediately like that, I was driving across Ontario to stay with my folks who lived in a city 30 hours away, and as I was driving, I was determined to sort of like leave this shit behind, and as I was driving, lights started to get really bright. Like I can remember this incident very clearly, and I was like, "Whew, this is hellish."
Wow.
But anyway, I'm just gonna like try to relax and just remember this is probably going to be a few weeks and then it'll go away.
And how many days after the cold turkey stoppage did you start having the visual changes?
Oh, that was within hours. That was within that was I missed one dose, and then I started to my body was like, you need this thing.
Oh my God. Okay. Yep.
For me, I know this isn't necessarily common, but it certainly was the case for me, because I can remember the incident very clearly. And then the following day, couldn't sleep without it. Couldn't see very well. Fine patterns started to become. They looked like kind of like just awash. Like I couldn't look at a TV without getting nauseous. I couldn't look at leaves or gravel, those kinds of fine patterns, and so I was just repelled by everything.
Is this what do people call this visual snow, or
Yep.
is there another term for it?
So,
okay, so it's visual snow.
Okay, yeah. So they call it, but it depends on. They'll call it visual snow. They'll call it hallucinogen persisting perception disorder, even if it's an SSRI often.
Okay.
I did try hallucinogens because I was like, okay, well, I got to do something to reset my brain. And the articles that were coming out was like, try ketamine, try mushrooms, try LSD. So that also happened later. Like I was desperate, man. It got bad, and
I've got people putting like frog poison on them and things like that. I can't remember what it's called, but I think you like poke like some holes in your skin and you kind of like rub a frog on it. But that's also like one of these like ayahuasca style like hallucinogenic experiences that has these resetting properties. People say, but yeah, I get the desperateness, and you're not alone. In there.
Well, and all I had was Google at that point, Google and deep isolation, and a bed, at my parents' place for a while, and that so 2021 was when this got inflamed, and for most of 2021, I was not a person that I know, like
did you quit your job or go on leave? Like, how did you? Like, you obviously had responsibilities. Like, what happened to those?
I still had my wits. I could still focus enough for like hours at a time to be able to do what I needed to do. And, I managed to muddle through somehow. Everybody was pretty like concerned. There was like, this guy is not the guy we know. Like, do we trust him with responsibility anymore? That was a hard thing, because for most of my whole life, I think a good sense of my identity came from being a competent person. And when this happened, I was like, is it some underlying thing? Like, is there something deeply wrong with me? And yeah, if people are telling me that I should be concerned, maybe I should be, so.
So flesh it out. So far you've talked about you'd have these shooting pains, real hypersensitivity to light, also some like perceptual disturbances that make it difficult to look at things. What else was in your constellation of symptoms that kind of burst onto the scene when the Trazodone ended?
Tinnitus in a bad way, very immediately. And it's still there most of the time. The visual thing, it's hard to even describe because it wasn't solely visual. It was embodied somehow. Like my system would it would almost feel like fear, but I wasn't afraid of any somatic like anxiety or something where everything would just startle me constantly. And I just
that's really common, because usually when I'm dealing with folks who have protracted withdrawal from maybe an antidepressant, one of the main things they describe is that stuck in the terror state.
Yes.
Like I feel like I've drunk like 10 cups of coffee. I'm constantly wide.
Yeah.
There's never a single moment where I can relax. I'm just always like on edge. And then they boil over into panic. They're afraid of everything, like they're afraid of their phone ringing. It's just like a massive fear state. And so that does really sound like a protracted, that's probably the most common protracted withdrawal symptom that I hear from antidepressant injuries.
Well, and that went on, and because then you start trying to make sense of it, and nobody's telling you that it's related to any of this. So in fact, they're more likely to tell you that you have some other underlying neuropsychiatric thing that just you didn't know about before, which is so sad and so hard to hear when you're feeling like this,
Oh my God, you're right, because it's compounding something. It's like you already have a compromised nervous system that's throwing you into a fear state. On top of that, no one knows what it is, and you're on your own, and every doctor you go to is just like, I don't know what to do with this, and so it's like this double hit. I can't imagine how terrifying that was at that time, where I guess you hadn't figured out what was happening to you yet, and you're really in the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And the terror was like that those particularly in the morning, cortisol spikes in the morning, you wake up, but instead of having a natural kind of like, little jolt, you're up, you're awake, it's like this, like the plane's going down, something's on fire, it feels like something terrible is happening or is about to happen. And then it spirals maybe until you exhaust yourself, and then you can kind of maybe relax for a few minutes out of desperation, and then jolt awake again and go like, it's just your system's completely messed up. And so that spiral that just went on and on and on until I kind of had to normalize it and find people who were experiencing similar things, so that I realized, oh, I'm in fact not crazy. This is in fact fairly common. It is not. It's not well recorded. It's not well studied. But as you say, you hear, enough about that. You hear enough about this anecdotally, that you start to wonder, well, why isn't this being studied, and why don't people share this? Well, first of all, people don't want to share this publicly because it sounds nuts, right? It does sound nuts. So
yeah, and there's also like, I think I don't know if I'd say willful ignorance, but part of me can't escape just the thought that if the mainstream medical groups had to acknowledge that some people were experiencing, these protracted withdrawal things that were completely ruining their life, it would just call into question like the whole way we practice, at least in the US, antidepressants are first-line treatments over here. I don't recall what the Canadian guidelines say, but the way you were treated, it almost sounded like it was a first-line treatment, because it's not like they shipped you off for some kind of psychotherapy. They just said, hey, go for it, And so it's really inconvenient, I think, for a lot of people to hear this stuff, because it would so change the way that people have been doing things.
Yeah, it threatens a whole model of care. Yeah.
So how well, I guess this is what I'd love to get your perspective on as someone who has prominent visual symptoms. What else have you heard out there from other sufferers of protracted withdrawal who have the visual symptoms? Because that's really something quite unique about your case. I was wondering if you could tell me like the other stories that you heard of similar sufferers with that side effect.
Sure. Actually, it was, I found a dude in Europe who had exactly sort of the same symptom set. And I was like, wow, this is awfully coincidental. What happened to you? And very similar story. He's fine now, but he had a really, really bad visual snow for a while. And so to clarify with the snow aspect, if I look out into the world like this, I look up into a sky without any glasses on, I do see static as well. I can now see patterns and watch screens and TVs, and it's all fine. But the static remains and the photosensitivity remains. LEDs, traffic lights, headlights.
Oh my God!
Each of these things look like a sun. Like it's the same intensity as looking at the sun, and so it's torture.
Can you drive?
I can drive. I mean, I can see what I'd like to say about this is that I can see everything, but it just hurts. It's just deeply uncomfortable all the time.
Jesus.
So these help me a lot. But for the first while, every time an LED was even in my visual field or traffic light or headlight, like I would either like stare at it, as you do, because you're like, what the hell is this effect? Or I'd have to like avert my eyes and look at the sky, and then I'd see static or whatever. So it's just there's no way out, because you're just always trying to like avoid these perceptual things. Okay. Anyway, so he managed to find his way out and rebalance his nervous system. And ended up on a bunch of group calls with people who had similar symptoms, and I was like, okay, so this is not like I'm unusual, but I'm not like alone. And then I went onto the forum survivingantidepressants.org, and holy shit, lots of people have visual symptoms. And so as I was typing this out, I was like, is this unusual? Am I crazy? Like, what's this thing? And they're like, unfortunately, no, we've heard of people who have these things. It's not, obviously not everybody, but some people end up in that state. It's like having tinnitus in your vision, right? So I went to them for a lot of coaching and grounding and just, and it helped like immensely. And I would reach out at random points of the day when the terror would hit and the visuals were awful, and I'd be like, whatever, I guess I'm tired because this is how I'm feeling now. Just tell me again, I'm going to get through this, and having somebody who was just like, yes, I'm here with you. I've experienced this. Just get to the other side, was just like so helpful to get started at least. So, yeah.
Wow. And so how many months are we since you stopped your Trazodone now?
Well, we're years now. So we're sorry, that was December 2020. So we're going on 3 years now.
Okay. And so you mentioned that, maybe you could just share the trajectory of your symptoms now. Like, do you still have that internal, like, revved up feeling all the time? Like, how have things sort of progressed over the last 3 years? Maybe you could walk us through the different kind of symptoms you were having and where they are now.
Yeah, sure. So at the present time, I do have I'm a little bit more revved up than I was prior to this whole thing, but it's sort of manageable. My mornings can be a little, it'll be a little surprising depending on what I have going on and if I have like anticipatory sort of fear or something. But I know that it's not I don't take it personally. It just sort of comes and I'm like, okay, well, get on with life. I have when I'm tired, these symptoms are worse. So if at certain points of the day, I'm busy or I'm anticipating something, my neuropathy will come back. The tinnitus will get worse. The visuals are always the same, but whether or not I react to them is another matter. And those are largely the symptoms. I don't have the raging sort of like underlying sort of unease or fear or whatever. Perception of space also went off for a while. I don't know what the hell that was about, but it was sort of like, where am I? What is this place? Kind of a feeling, knowing where I am, like cognitively, but somatically, my body would go like, what?
Do you ever get like a day where things go away, or maybe an hour where things go away, like these little windows where you're like, oh my God, like my brain, at least for this brief moment, was able to regulate itself into like a normal functional pattern?
Finally, I went to Switzerland and had a whole lot of encouragement from old friends and a doctor there, and that I started experiencing these windows of calm, and then tried to find more of them or relax into receiving more of them, and now, I mean, aside from the vision tinnitus, I can have like multi-hour windows of normal and calm. It's still a little distorted, but it's pretty good. Like it's 80% of where I was.
And with the sunglasses on, like, is that enough to keep vision not painful for you? Like, or is it still like pretty like decently uncomfortable and unusual?
It's always a little bit uncomfortable because there's always just this little longing underneath that's like, because even with the sunglasses, things still look a little weird. So it's like, okay, they still look weird. I'm trying to learn to accept it because, I mean, I'm thankful that I can see, but having to accept that seeing will always be uncomfortable is a weird mind trick, right? Like if that's the way forward, it's like I have to train myself that uncomfortable is okay, and that's just a really hard thing to learn. So that's a part that really still bothers me, and I'm doing a lot of research. I happen to be a researcher, so I threw myself into like the depths of neuropsychiatric research during this whole time, and advocated very strongly for myself. And I don't claim to be a doctor or an authority in the standard sense, of course, but I sure did learn a lot about how to manage this stuff, had to on my own. And one of the things I stumbled across recently was some promising, treatments that are still unusual, RTMS treatments for visual snow. That's, as you know, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. I did that last year as well, earlier this year, and it made a huge difference in terms of my ability to just sort of reset, focus, get my attention back, my willpower, because I was mostly bedridden for a very long time, and that's not like me at all. I ended up on benzos for a while. That was all focus, and then I had to withdraw off those too.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you as well is how did this experience change how you saw the medical profession and doctors?
Yeah, that's a cliche now, I guess, but boy, I really wanted to trust medical professionals when I started this journey. I really wanted to. I said, James, you're not a doctor, just like let them tell you what to do. And sadly, and I hesitate to say this because I know people need to trust their medical professionals, but sadly, after coming through this and still having to explain and re-explain this to medical professionals in now a fairly capable way, I'd say, I can't let myself trust medical professionals anymore. I have the hardest time letting myself trust medical professionals now, and I don't want to be that person, but I've become that person, and it's not that I don't trust any medical professionals, but I have my spidey senses are up now. I'm like, I understand that this is sort of like what you have to say to get through the appointment, but ultimately this is either gonna cost me or give me nothing, and so.
And it's complicated, right? Because my daughter was recently hurt. She fell out of a window and had a traumatic brain injury. Actually,
God, I'm sorry.
And so, we were. We were in the emergency room. They scanned her. They looked after her fractures. We took an air flight to the hospital. We were seen by different neurologists and trauma surgeons and eye doctors and all that kind of crazy stuff. And they did an amazing job with her.
Okay.
We stayed in the hospital, and it was just like. And this is after I'm already on this journey. I'm already pretty distrustful of things. And it really kind of highlighted to me, there's some areas of medicine when everything kind of lines up, and it's like more of that kind of acute stuff, I think, fractures, things like that. All of that stuff seems to be
pretty good.
For the most part, pretty good
Yeah.
and easy to measure. But when you get into like the chronic disease management space, when you start talking about, I guess, antidepressants, even statins for me, I'll probably never take one, just based on the things I've read and the people I've spoken to. You start to kind of wonder about that, because I know that's really big business, and the outcomes there, they're really a lot harder to measure as well. And so I think there's areas in medicine now which I'm very suspicious of, and some areas where I'm just like, nah, you guys just go for it.
Like if I had to go for stitches, or I was like, I had a limb that needed to be reset or something, I would certainly go in there without any hesitation. But in these fields that feel like contemporary witchcraft, if I could say so, I'm just a lot more skeptical. And as you say, like neuroimmunological things are like, I don't know, man. We don't know what we're talking about as human beings in that domain often, I think now, which is scary, but yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the experience where you were kind of, it does sound like almost like there was a wee bit of pressuring there. Hey, just take this medication, it's all good. Like, where else is this happening? Is this going to happen with my cholesterol or my blood pressure?
Right.
Or if I'm having diabetes, is it just going to be someone who's just like, hey, no problems, just go for it, because that's common, probably in Canada as well. I know in the US, it's like you go into your family medicine appointments and it's just in and out really, and they're just common. Like, oh, just take this, it's fine.
My older folks in my family, they've all gone through gone down that path as well, and I've been reading a lot about this stuff. What was the most recent book, Brain Energy, on metabolic disorder, the relationship between metabolic disorders and neurological and psychiatric sort of issues. And and it had me thinking that, like, boy, if we really give ourselves, I don't know, many decades and a lot of change, and we could handle things a lot better for, like, people with, with a whole host of different kinds of difficulties that are commonly, overly medicated now, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of, and I get probably, not on this channel, but in general, when I'm talking to people that don't watch my content, I start talking about how, like, the medicalization of depression, and just saying, you have a medical condition, how dangerous that is. People go, it helps reduce stigma. Mm-hmm. And in my perspective, I'm like, it kind of helps justify, the easy doling out of medications, when you kind of say it like that. And so I'm always like, even the way people are taught to think about their problems, I think.
Yeah, pathologize them, right? Like, yeah.
And that's not to say that there's not people out there that were born into this world with a depressive personality or had some kind of abnormality. But honestly, like, the more I do this work and the more I talk to people, and I spent a lot of time in emergency rooms. I've spent years after training, years and years in emergency rooms talking to people after suicide attempts. And so I often ask them, what's going on in their life. Invariably, there is always some kind of either trauma that's going on, or a situation they can't escape, or this massive buildup of anxiety which seems inescapable that has just plunged them into depression. A handful of times I've seen people and they just go, it came out of nowhere, I don't know what's going on, and they're not on, like, all these drugs or using, like, caffeine and nicotine in kind of crazy amounts. They're out there, but that's like less than 5% of the people. I mean, the rest of them are just burnt out, overworked, relational problems, like trauma, and I think we just gloss over that completely, and we just say, oh, you have a medical condition, it's a serious problem, and don't worry, we have this treatment. And it's so dangerous.
Yeah, I had several friends, like, as I mentioned, like, and these were surprising to me. They shouldn't be, I guess, but I sat with one a couple of weeks ago, and like almost exactly the same sequence, like the same domino effect. And as you say, like, it was a period of intense stress, insomnia, big life changes, and lack of social support, probably, and also a fear of, I think, reaching out for support, and so, and I have this impulse now to do as you can do as a real expert, right? But to say, like, don't do this. Here are some other alternatives. I'll call you a couple times a week, and take a holiday, or I don't know, get into a good new project or whatever. But I understand, of course, during the pandemic, at least as it was for me, it was awfully hard to pivot like that or get the support. But now, when I see this happening, or I heard it from another friend a couple of days ago, and like, new diagnosis, new prescription. I was like, and my heart sank again. I was like, are you sure? Like, do you really need to go down this route? This could be like years of your life, So yeah, it saddens me.
But
and
what you described there, like wanting to tell her, hey, let me give you a call. I'll check in with you. Listen, what's going on with you? It sounds like it's really anchored in things going on in your life. Let's give it a little bit of time. Medications that could potentially be dangerous. You never know if you're going to get side effects. They might be hard to stop. That sounds like the kind of care that you wished that you would have been able to receive when you went in the first time. Someone to actually not probably have you out in 25 minutes, but really get a sense of what's going on. And our system's not set up to give that care. And I think intuitively, for most people, I think I'm going to drop the brainwashing word. If they weren't brainwashed so hard by what constantly seems like this antidepressant, like take antidepressant campaign, and it's kind of masked sometimes with, we got to fight the stigma and this and that, and post your pill on Instagram and all of these different things that are going on. I mean, they don't really seem like nasty or evil as one-offs, but when you look at the totality of them coming together, I think it pressures us out of the intuition that a lot of us have that, hey, just genuine human connection, support, talking, and time might be the best thing for someone who was in your situation or was in the situation of a friend. I think we get kind of convinced out of something that really feels natural to most people, actually, originally.
Yeah, and I've thought about that a lot. I wondered why. Why is it, to me, the question that comes up is, why is it that we should rather be proud of a diagnosis and, taking a pill, rather than confronting the fear of discomfort that comes with being with someone going through a difficult time? It seems like we have a harder time actually sitting with that discomfort over a long time. That's harder than the discomfort of confessing that I'm abnormal somehow, pathologically. And I know that those things are not totally mutually exclusive. Sometimes they overlap. But again, in the case of these people that I've known for a while, I think certainly for me, and probably in their case, they need more people, more support, more time, more love, more care, whatever. And it might take a while, and that's hard, but that's what they need. That's what I needed, So.
Yeah, I mean, people, they do need, for want of a better term, a little bit of the tough love, because, there is something about being depressed or having a lot of anxiety that really does make you feel like a failure sometimes, like you're inadequate, like you don't have your shit together.
Yeah.
And so people often shame themselves when they feel sad. And, then like a wolf in sheep's clothing comes along, which is the idea of, hey, don't worry, James, you have a chemical imbalance or whatever they want to say. You have a medical condition, which is, in some ways they say, this is great. This is destigmatizing. They're not going to help. They're not going to hate themselves because, wow, we're saying this is a medical condition and giving that person all of the, it's not benefits, but it's almost like the leeway that we give to people in society who are having medical conditions. And it's often, I mean, it's warranted. Really.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. Yeah. And so it comes in as if it's this good thing, but I think about it deeply as well, because on the one hand, maybe you're allaying some of their self-hatred, but if you actually work with them to fix those problems, then they go away. And what is the opportunity cost of starting to think, oh my God, I'm depressed and now I need this pill, when you might have you may genuinely have problems maintaining healthy relationships, or you may genuinely have problems like figuring out what your career path is and different things. You may have genuine problems with your use of caffeine or other drugs or stimulants. Every time you kind of ignore those other things because you have a medical illness, it's like you're not growing psychologically to address them. And there's an opportunity cost in that. And no one talks about it. And it's just like, to me, that's another one of the really big disasters with the antidepressants. It's just the opportunity cost that people have lost in kind of developing psychologically and working through certain things. Yeah.
Well, I can relate to that certainly, because once I started to kind of get enough of myself back, I could start to kind of work through some patterns that weren't working for me in my life. A lot of stuff was working too, and I could kind of lean into that and go like, well, things are fine because all this is working. But I was neglecting these deeply important things from time to time that I needed to spend more time working on. And had I not tried to put a pill in me to fix it, I would have started to work on those things more deliberately and over a longer period of time. So I'm finally there, but I had to go through more suffering to get to that point, where we could have just started there in the first place. So.
I know, and it's so normal. Again, doing this for a while and also having my own different things that I've gone through in my life with mental health things. You'll find it crazy, but I'm a psychiatrist, but probably the biggest thing I struggled with growing up was connecting with other people. That was like a lifelong journey for me, learning how to empathize and things like that. And I think I'm much better at it now, but you could imagine how that could play out in someone's life, right? If you have a problem with empathy, it's playing out with your coworkers, it's playing out with your relationships, it's playing out with your family, it's playing out with your friends. And so you have these ripple effects. And what I've learned doing this is everyone has a weakness, everyone has a blind spot. And I don't think there should be any shame in that or any need to kind of, get behind this shield of I have a medical illness, because everyone out there, especially if they live long enough, they're all gonna it's gonna come out. It's just inevitable. That's like 100% true.
Absolutely, it's going to come out at some point. Something will happen, and it's going to be hard. Like, and same. I mean, in some ways, like I'm a professor. I do research on my own. Midlife, it's like life has become smaller. My world's become smaller in some ways, and I needed to figure out how to manage that transition and find more meaningful, longer lasting friendships and so on. And that's still a journey I'm going to be on for a while, but that was the task. That was the task then. It is the task now. So not dissimilar from yours, I think. And the pill was never going to fix that. The pill was never going to fix that.
And I know it's the thing, I'm still working on my relationship with my wife. I'm still reading books about relationships and, connection and things like that. It's just become something so enjoyable and over time. And so, but James, we've covered a lot, and I think we could probably bring it to a close pretty soon. But did you have any other questions, or were there any other topics that you wanted to explore?
Well, I mean, for me, the way out, and I don't want to give anybody a guidebook, and I don't know how much you would like me to share on that front, but I found a very particular set of things really helpful. So
I want to hear it. Let's hear them.
Okay, so as far as sleep is concerned, now I tried a bunch of supplements at many different points in this process, but I found and I'd written them off as helpful at one point, and then revisited it with some guidance from these folks in Switzerland, and it made a massive difference for me. So one thing was RTMS that helped get me kind of reset and able enough to schedule things and move my body and show up and travel and so on. Another was calming agents, GABAergic supplements. So for me, that was magnesium and its cofactors, B6, D3, taurine in relatively high doses, magnolia bark for sleep if I can't sleep. Also a GABAergic supplement. And then I started playing with things that would help me focus a little bit. And at some points I reacted poorly, but now I'm reacting better to them. One includes lion's mane as a way of kind of just getting me focused without as much caffeine. And all of those things have this effect of reducing neurotoxicity, hyperexcitability that's come as a result of this. I don't want to be on all of these things forever, but for the meantime, they have helped so profoundly. I can't even. It was like night and day when I started, making sure that I did this on a routine basis. And some folks who experienced similar things to me have also tried it and found relief, to my surprise and to my delight.
Is that the supplement regimen that you just mentioned, that they tried those ones and they're like, wow, like I actually feel noticeably better. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So I don't, like I say, I don't want to pretend that I have the answer for everybody, but like, my God, if you're trying to decide between Trazodone or an SSRI and what I just gave you, I'm going to promise you that that's going to be a better bet to start off with. So, yeah.
Well, great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for letting me.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm gonna stop our recording now.
Okay.